Well, welcome to episode 3 of Filmworx. Fantastic. Oh my word, do I have a guest for you. Marius de Nysschen, the director of photography. Wow. Yes. So look, DOP is a word that's being thrown around really, really easily. And it's really hard to define when are you a videographer and when are you a cinematographer? And that is really a personal thing for so many. That's why I have Marius here. But Marius, before we jump right into the deep, deep questions, just who the heck are you, dude?
Cool. I'm Marius de Nysschen, and I'm a director of photography. I come from a small town called Makwasi.
Wow.
No one knows where that is.
No.
And yeah, I've been lucky enough to pursue my career as a cinematographer. It's my passion, and I currently reside in Somerset West. Yeah, I have a wife and 2 kids, and we recently moved to Somerset West actually. So
Wow.
we new in the Western Cape.
I heard we're not the latest talk you did, eh?
No, I constantly find myself in situations where my wife can get a bit impatient with me sometimes, because once I ramble about cinematography, I can end up talking to random people for hours and hours. Just the other day, I met a guy called Mike, such a sweet old man. He's about 70 plus, and we got talking about videography, and he he's a hobbyist videographer, and ended up inviting me to their video AV club, and I went there for a talk and spent a good amount of time there, and I just love talking about cinematography. So whenever I get the chance, I'll take it.
There's some amazing TV shows and series that you've already done, feature films. Run us some of the highlights.
Cool. Yeah. So I specialize in narrative cinematography, mostly long form. So the majority of my work consists of either films or TV series, and I also do a bunch of commercials. But the most recent projects was a show called Mooi Weer en Warm and Die Dinge van 'n Kind. Those are 2 series that we recently did. And then I've done a couple of movies as well. Recent one was called Surviving Gaza. It's you can watch it on Amazon Prime.
Wow.
It's on there. And and I've done a whole bunch of Film Summit with director Andre Velds.
Nice.
I think we've done about 28, 29 now.
What?
But yeah, so
Jeez. Isn't there in every industry this imposter syndrome that we experience, right? And the moment you pick up a camera, there's a journey that starts for you. You want to tell stories. You have a dream in your life, and so often it feels to me like the word cinematographer might be a word that is being sold cheap sometimes. Would you mind taking me on the journey? Because the reason why I invited you, I actually met him years ago when someone suggested, listen, you need to use this videographer. And we got you out for an ad for Adidas, more like a little just documenting something. They sent the footage through and I edited it. But years later, now you're doing these incredible feature films and TV series. Run me through that process of discovery, where you had to move from videographer to cinematography. Now, this is a personal journey. I'd like to hear your story.
okay, so when I was in film school, I obviously had to decide which type of cinematographer I wanted to be. Like I said, I'm from a very small town, so we didn't necessarily know I didn't know what a cinematographer or cinematography was. I knew that I wanted to get into a visual medium. I was always interested in taking photos. I got a film camera my first film camera when I was 10 years old.
Nice.
And since then I've always taken pictures. So when I ended up going to film school, I realized that I've got this taste in cinema, or this visual taste of images and cinematographers' work that inspire me and that I can emotionally connect with. And but my skill level wasn't obviously close to that, because I didn't know anything.
Right.
So I immediately knew that, okay, cool, there's a big gap between me, between my skill level and where my taste level is. So I needed to close that gap. So when I was in film school, I made sure that I knew that the only way to close that gap effectively is to put in as much work as you possibly can, shoot as much as you possibly can,
Okay.
and just basically put in the hours. And at some level, you kind of have to get obsessed with it to effectively achieve what you want to achieve.
There's two sides to this, right? So there's either the direction of shooting a lot of stuff and falling into a groove and just continuing and rinse and repeat, or using this opportunity of constantly shooting and changing it and tweaking, I guess.
Yes, exactly. So I try to shoot as many different things as possible.
Oh, okay.
I was often in situations where I knew it wasn't going to be for me, but I needed to try it out to see, because the film industry is big, and the cinematography, there's a lot of different ways you can end up, and I just knew I needed to shoot as much as possible. So there, in my film school years, I really tried to, outside of film school, try to shoot as much as possible. So I shot a lot of weddings, and then it wasn't necessarily something that I really could connect with, but I always tried to find a challenge within whatever I was shooting, regardless of the content. So in the case of weddings, it taught me to think quickly on my feet, to use natural light, to always be intentional about where the people are, where's the sun coming from, because I'm using completely natural light. And also to not miss a moment.
Yes.
You can't really get...
You're not going to redo it, reschedule it.
Exactly. So I was always focusing on those things, because that could contribute to me becoming a narrative cinematographer.
Interesting.
And then whenever I did something else, I always tried to take from it what I could, and then leave the stuff that I knew I wasn't going to use behind. So that was kind of my way of just shooting as much as possible. And I was lucky to... A lot of my friends were musicians, and so I was always keen to shoot a music video here and there, and I knew I needed to build a showreel. So I just shot a lot, and I was lucky that while I was still in film school, we got into Silverskermfees.
Yes.
And I shot a short film for that, and that was kind of the first thing where money was involved. That like this, there was a bit more responsibility, and it wasn't just a bunch of friends trying to experiment with things. And then,
do you mind if I intervene? So Silverskermfees is an annual festival where the Channel CakeNet commissions a variety of scripts to be made, and this could be anything from 10 to 20 minutes long, and this really is to cultivate new talent and find new talent, and it's great to hear that it really is something that works as well.
Yeah, I mean, the year after that we got another one, and so that was really an opportunity for me to be in a situation where the pressure was much higher, and to see kind of what the narrative, my first taste of the narrative world of things, and for somehow I really felt that's the route I needed to go.
Wow.
And so then I knew, obviously, someone needs to take a chance on you at some point to give you the opportunity to shoot their project.
Yes.
So because they need to trust you with their project, because there's money involved, and you need to perform on a certain level. So I knew I had a solid showreel by then, because I shot a lot of content, or just a wide variety of things, but also tried to keep it within my visual taste of what I liked. And then I worked with a production company called No Vanaand Films. They're called Nachtvlug Films now, and I did a lot of color grading for them, and I also did on Hotel, the series Hotel, season 1. I was the focus puller on there, so I never really went into focus pulling. And then I'm friends with Johan, one of the owners of Nachtvlug, and he asked me one day, listen, don't you want to come and focus pull for us? Because back then it wasn't, focus pullers wasn't so in demand as they are now.
Right.
And it was also like they use still lenses. They use the 24-105
Yes.
Canon f4 lens to shoot the whole season 1.
Wow.
And it was like,
so you have to hit your marks with a photo lens.
it was crazy. And also nothing was wireless, so I had to pull off the barrel with like a little plastic follow focus. And I remember I had this mark, because it's like 8 characters at the same time, and Hotel is a very busy show because it's like zoom in, zoom out. And
it's a mockumentary style, right?
Exactly. So whenever they like zoom in, the lenses aren't parfocal, so they don't keep
they just change
the focus. They just focus
goodness.
change, and you just have to. It's kind of a baptism of fire.
Yes.
And I knew I didn't ever want to go and be a focus puller, because everyone's got different routes. But I know sometimes when you get into that, you can get stuck there, and then once you're seen as a focus puller, it can be difficult to transition from that to a DOP.
Interesting.
So I didn't want to spend too much time doing that, but in that stage of my career, I was hungry for on-set experience, like real set experience.
Right.
So the DOP that they had was also a super nice guy, Craig Marshkalk, and he was kind of my mentor, and I learned a lot from him, and actual on-set etiquette and all that.
Wow.
And so I did 2 seasons, and then I decided, okay, cool, I'm gonna try and push a bit more just to shoot. And then eventually they gave me my first opportunity as well. My first narrative project was with No Fernand, and it was based on Chris Barnard's the first art transplant, and it was this period piece. I think it was like a 60-minute, but it was quite a long movie, and it's my first big narrative project.
Wow.
I did like 4 Silverskerm things before that, but that was kind of my only narrative experience, and that was terrifying because it was my first time working with director André Velds as well, and he didn't know who I was, because No Fernand suggested me.
Yes, so he didn't have a say in it, and now he's like, now I'm getting a fresh DOP. The Oaks barely got any experience. What do I do with them now?
Exactly, and he wasn't super happy about it. But like
to be fair,
yeah, I understand it completely, because who's this guy?
Yes,
because I think I was like 25.
And how did you feel? Like, how did you 25. Feel inside? Did you? I mean, we talked about imposter syndrome. You probably like the bells were ringing.
The imposter syndrome was real. It still is. I mean, I experience that all the time. But that specifically was like, oh my goodness. So I knew, okay, this was a chance for me to, within the visual style that I like, because it's so rare that you can get the opportunity to really go into what I think I need to go into. So if I mess this up, then I know maybe, hey, it's not for me.
Wow.
But I just knew I needed to give it my all. And then, yeah, I got a phone call from Andre one day, and he was like, kind of sussing me out and see what kind of person I am. And it's like we were discussing, he was like asking me what my lighting approaches will be and things like that. I was like super nervous, and then it really went well, and it was such a cool collaboration, and we clicked, and like I say, since then we've done more than 30 projects together.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a great experience, and I'm super grateful for that, because that kind of, after that, it just snowballed, and that's where I ended up in the narrative side of things.
Amazing. Well, I must say, the reason why I know that Marius made the transition was I called him once for some camera work, and he said no. So, no, that's when I knew that he made his transition. It's done now, and I'm really proud of you for doing so. Marius, let's talk about that style. There's a certain style that DOPs develop that viewers enjoy, and you have to develop your own visual style as well. So run me by how that development process works, and you're still growing as well, but where you at now and where you were.
Yeah, so I think there's so many components to cinematography, and the one thing that always interested me the most was lighting. Whenever I walk into a room, or wherever I read a script, or wherever, that's the first thing I kind of think about. I know other cinematographers think about other things, and it's different for everyone, but for me, lighting really is something I'm passionate about. I love figuring out how to light something and trying different lighting techniques, and so my visual taste was very reliant on lighting. So what I did for a long time is, like I mentioned, you have to kind of become obsessive about things in order to figure them out. And then I also think that doesn't matter at what level you are, at some point you needed to learn how to do something. If Roger Deakins could learn how to do what he's doing, then it means anyone can learn
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of persistence and doing it for long enough and consistently enough. I think it's like that with anything in life.
Wow.
So I was constantly getting reference images of frames that I thought was visually interesting or made me feel a certain emotion, and I tried to break it down and see why is that? Because it's just
Oh, wow.
a frame. It's just
Yes.
a room with a person in it.
Yes.
Why am I feeling an emotion now? So then I try to break it down and see, okay, well, where's the key light coming from? Okay, it's coming from this side. Okay, there's a shadow this side. And most of them had the same things in common. And most of them were lighting considerations.
Okay.
So I started to realize, okay, well, there's a pattern to where that is. And mostly I'm interested in an image that's got a lot of depth. And that's got to do with the light to dark, where the shadows are, where the highlights are. And so a great tool to use is DaVinci Resolve. So I pulled all those images into DaVinci Resolve, DaVinci Resolve, and then I applied false color, and that's just a scientific way to see where the exposure levels are. Because
Wow. Interesting.
Every level of light in the image is represented by a color on the chart, from completely white to completely dark, and then there's variations of gray in between. So every variation is represented by a color. So I could then have the opportunity as a young film student to put in a frame from Roger Deakins, the best cinematographer in the world, or whoever, and see, okay, this is how he exposes his images.
Wow.
For me, that was like a game changer.
Yes.
And then I could see, okay, most of what I'm interested in has got kind of like they call it a checkerboard lighting type of thing, where you've got layers of light to dark, light to dark, light to dark.
Oh.
And contrast ratios is then something I discovered where, what's the contrast ratio between the key light and the fill light, the key light and the background, and all these things. And that really opened up a lot of things for me, because then I realized this is why I'm interested in lighting, and kind of went down that rabbit hole. But anyway.
That is amazing, dude.
Yeah.
Like that, and that really talks about that obsession to eventually then understanding your tool, right? The gun that you're going to the war with. And you're a Canon man yourself. So run me by understanding, and Canon has an incredible color science. So you now go delving deep into the color science, delving deep into your lighting, your exposure. Run me by your preference for the Canon C500.
There's a couple of reasons why I ended up there. So the first real cinema camera I bought was a Canon C300 Mark II. And I really liked that camera because you could shoot 12-bit 444,
Sure.
which was crazy for the time it came out. It's still a good camera. And that was really the camera that sold me on Canon's color science. Because I shot, I think, about 8 films with that camera, and it was such a workhorse, and it's such a reliable camera, and the skin tones are super accurate. So that's where I kind of knew, okay, I prefer, because I tested a lot of things and ended up preferring the color science from Canon. And then after that, I bought an Alexa Mini, and obviously ARRI's color science is the best.
Yes.
So I had an Alexa Mini for about 2 years, and then the only issue is that the price is so high for that camera that in our climate, or back then, it was difficult to get the camera onto jobs for what it's worth.
Right.
You'd have to discount it to a point where it was kind of the same rate as I got for my Canon.
Right.
But obviously this was better than my Canon.
Yes.
But in a way. But then the only way I could get the rates I needed to get was to do commercials. And at that point I was really focusing I was on a lot of long form things. So I didn't really do a lot of commercials because I don't have an agent, and I've never had an agent. And so I was focusing on that. So then the Canon C500 Mark II came out, and it just ticked a lot more boxes for me than my Mini was at that stage, because it was full frame.
Sure.
I could do 6K RAW.
Nice.
And the Mini started to get a little bit older, and it made more financial sense for me to get something that ticks a lot more boxes for me, and I could actually get the rental rate of what it's actually worth.
Wow.
So then I sold my Mini and I got the C500 Mark II, and that's what I currently have, and I'm super happy with that.
You went from videographer to cinematographer. Run us by some practical steps that someone that dreams to do a movie, a TV series, going from a town that no one even knew.
Cool. Well, I can only talk as to what worked for me personally, but I think, like I said, you're going to have to get obsessed with cinematography. At some point, you're going to have to really, at least for a good amount of time. And like I'm saying all of this just to also keep in mind that I'm nowhere near where I think I can be. Like the thing about cinematography is you can never master it. It's impossible. So that's what's so great, because you're always trying to figure out how to be better, and there's always room for improvement. You'll never get to a point where you can't improve. So that's also just something to keep in mind. But I think just be intentional about what you do, and try and figure out what your taste is in cinematography, and kind of, like I say, try and figure out how that's done, because everything can technically be broken down, and there is like a recipe that you can not necessarily follow, because each room and each situation is different, but there's definitely a way of breaking something down technically. And then something that I do every day is, whenever I'm in a new space, or even if I go on date night with my wife and we're in a restaurant or whatever, the first thing that I look at is, where's the natural light coming from? I always think like that, and it's just like it's
Baby, what are you thinking of? I'm wondering where the key light's coming from.
Exactly. And but also when we location scout, like I always think about what's happening naturally in this space, because for me, I like to keep things looking as natural as possible. Obviously, if it's like a sci-fi movie or something different, then the story will ask for something else. But most often than not, I try to keep things natural. So I always try to see what's happening naturally, and I always try and think, okay, if I had one light, where would I put it?
Interesting. Okay.
And then mostly, I keep my approach is very simplistic on set as well. I never try to overcomplicate things, especially lighting, because I've been on the other side where you're taking all of the lights out of the truck, and then it can get very counterproductive very quickly. So I always try to. I think as well, like there's a saying that if something doesn't look right, turn off some lights until it looks right, because usually you've overlit something or something. So I always try to see where's the natural light coming from and what's happening with people's faces, if it's a harder source, if it's a softer source. So that's just something you can think about in any situation, and we kind of practice that muscle memory. And then also I would say you have to realize that the film industry is a very stressful place, but you can't let that get you too much. When I first started out, it was very nerve-wracking for me to be... The first 10 movies I did was insanely stressful for me, to a point where I started not really enjoying the process anymore, because I was like overwhelmed with this imposter syndrome and this anxiety and this. And then you kind of have to realize that's never going to go away, or at least for me. But I need to acknowledge that that is going to be there and where it's coming from. And then I can kind of manage that and use it as a positive thing. Because you kind of need to stress about something. If you don't stress about something, you don't really care about it, right? So I think it's just managing that was a big thing for me. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that, because it doesn't have anything to do with your technical abilities. But yeah, it can be a intimidating place. So
you're talking about non-technical abilities, but I'm pretty sure that budgeting and just being an approachable person will also take you quite far.
Yes, that's also something. I mean, obviously it's a personality thing, but if you're a nice person and you just don't be an ass. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, just be nice and be diplomatic and just be there to do what you can to get the best story out there. I think sometimes people's egos can get in the way of being productive and just doing what's best for the story. Just try to do your best.
Marius, I've learned so much today, and I'm pretty sure you've learned just as much. And I'm sure if you are on this journey, I really hope that the gems that Marius dropped today really empower you and motivate you just to know that even he that's already making a bunch of movies, still that imposter syndrome doesn't go away. But it's about consistency and really a strive for excellence. Marius, thank you so much. And be sure to subscribe, like and share, and be part of the Filmworx fantastic journey.